Hello and welcome to FedBiz 5. I'm Sam Fields. Here's a question that can completely change the way you pursue federal contracts. When do you think the competition really starts? When the RFP hits SAM.gov? When proposals are due? When you start writing? Actually, for some of the most important decisions, you may already be late. Because before that RFP ever appears, the government may already be deciding something that dramatically changes who you will compete against. Should this requirement be set aside for small businesses? Should it be an 8A competition? A HUBZone set aside? A women-owned small business set aside? A service-disabled, veteran-owned small business set aside? Or should everybody, including the big guys, be allowed to compete? And here's the part a lot of small contractors miss. You can have a legitimate role in shaping that decision. Not by lobbying for special treatment, not by trying to convince an agency to build a solicitation around your company, by giving the government something it actually needs to make the decision. Evidence. Evidence that capable small businesses exist. Evidence that they understand the work. Evidence that they have the people, systems, experience, capacity, and partners to perform it. And evidence that the government can get competitive pricing from the small business market. That is what we are talking about today. How to get involved before the RFP drops, while the acquisition strategy can still move. Let's start with the rule of two. For acquisitions above the simplified acquisition threshold, which is currently $350,000, the current FAR generally requires a total small business set-aside when the contracting officer reasonably expects to receive offers from at least 2 responsible small businesses and make an award at fair market prices. And above that threshold, contracting officers are also required to consider the socioeconomic programs first. That means 8A, HUBZone, service-disabled veteran-owned, and women-owned small business opportunities may all be part of the discussion. The phrase that matters is reasonable expectation. Because the contracting officer cannot just say, I bet a couple of small businesses can probably do this. They need support for the acquisition file. They conduct market research. They review past procurements. They search for contractors. They may talk with agency small business specialists. They may consult SBA Procurement Center representatives. And very often, they ask industry. That is your opening. Now, one of the easiest ways to become part of that evidence happens before you ever respond to a notice. It is your SBA Small Business Search Profile. SBS. SBS is what used to be called Dynamic Small Business Search. And SBA currently tells contracting officials to use it as part of their market research. Think about what that means. Your profile is not just administrative paperwork sitting somewhere behind your SAM.gov registration. It is market intelligence about your company. If a contracting officer searches for businesses under a particular NAICS code or capability and you do not appear, you may not get counted. And appearing is only half the battle. Imagine they find you, open your profile, and your capabilities narrative says something generic like, "We provide innovative, customer-focused solutions to public and private sector clients." Okay, what solutions? For whom? At what scale? Where? With what experience? For what mission? The contracting officer is doing research, not solving a riddle. Your SAM.gov record, SBS profile, capability statement, website, certifications, NAICS codes, keywords, and past performance should tell basically the same story. The easier you are to understand, the easier you are to count as a credible source. Now let's get to one of the most overlooked tools in government contracting: sources sought notices. A sources sought notice is not an RFP. You are not submitting a proposal. There is no contract waiting for somebody at the end of it. And that is exactly why a lot of contractors ignore them. Big mistake. Because the government may be asking, are there enough qualified small businesses to set this aside? Can small companies perform the entire scope? What kind of past performance exists in the market? Can companies handle the geography? Can they staff it? Do they have bonding, clearances, cybersecurity credentials, supply chain capacity? Can they do the work at a fair market price? If capable small businesses do not respond, what evidence does the contracting officer have? Silence tells its own story. And sometimes that story is, "We looked. We could not establish a reasonable expectation of adequate small business competition." Now, you may be staring at a full and open solicitation competing against companies with 10,000 employees. That is why sources sought responses are part of capture. Same thing with an RFI, or request for information. An RFI may ask broader questions about capabilities, pricing, delivery, acquisition structure, technical approaches, or whether the government's proposed requirement even makes sense. The current FAR actively encourages these early exchanges with industry: RFIs, draft RFPs, industry conferences, one-on-one meetings, pre-solicitation notices, site visits. The government wants information before it locks everything down. Your job is to show up when it is asking. So what does a strong response actually look like? Not a 12-page corporate brochure with beautiful stock photography and 3 paragraphs about your CEO's vision. Answer the questions, every one of them, and prove 6 things. First, eligibility. Are you small under the anticipated NAICS code? What certifications do you hold? Are they current? Second, capability. Can you actually perform the requirement as the prime? Do not say, "We can meet all requirements." Show how. Third, capacity. How many people can you deploy? Where can you perform? How fast can you mobilize? What facilities, equipment, clearances, bonding, licenses, systems, or suppliers do you have? Fourth, past performance. And specificity wins here. Provided IT support is weak. Supported 2,400 users across 18 locations while maintaining a 98% on-time ticket resolution rate tells the buyer something. Give scope, scale, your role, contract size when appropriate, and an outcome. Fifth, pricing reality. If the government asks for pricing information, give them something useful. Maybe it is a range, commercial rates, labor category pricing, unit pricing, catalog pricing, or a rough order of magnitude estimate with assumptions. Remember what the contracting officer may be trying to prove. Not just that 2 small businesses can perform, that an award could reasonably be made at a fair market price. And sixth, team depth. If you need subcontractors or partners, that is okay. The government does not expect every 10-person company to have every capability sitting in-house, but your team needs to be credible. Who is doing what? How does the team cover the complete requirement? Can the small business prime actually manage and perform its required share? That is much stronger than pretending you can perform everything everywhere by next Tuesday with a heroic amount of coffee. Now, where do you find these opportunities early enough? Do not search SAM.gov only for active RFPs. Search for sources sought: RFIs, pre-solicitation notices, special notices, draft solicitations. Then look at agency procurement forecasts. Acquisition.gov currently provides links to agency procurement forecasts across the federal government. A forecast can give you months of runway. You can identify a future requirement, research the incumbent, study the buying office, figure out the likely NAICS code, look at previous awards, identify potential partners, talk with the agency small business office, and start building a response strategy before everybody else suddenly discovers the contract on SAM.gov. That is a completely different competitive position. And here is another important point. Influence does not mean complaining. Maybe you see a draft requirement with a 30-day transition period, and you know 60 days is operationally realistic. Explain why. Maybe 3 unrelated services have been bundled into one enormous scope that few small businesses could perform. Do not just say, "This is unfair." Explain the market problem. Show how the work could potentially be divided by geography, task area, phase, or contract line item without increasing risk to the government. Useful feedback is persuasive. Complaints are just complaints. And if you think there are at least 2 capable small businesses that could perform the requirement at fair market prices, say that. Explain why. Help the contracting officer document the market. Because the best time to shape the competition is before the competition officially exists.
Now, this is also where FedBiz 365 can help. FedBiz 365 helps small business contractors identify procurement forecasts, sources sought notices, RFIs, recompetes, expiring contracts, and other early buying signals, instead of only discovering opportunities after the final solicitation appears. It can also help you research buyers, incumbents, and competitors, identify potential teaming and subcontracting partners, understand the contract context, and organize those early opportunities into a real pipeline. Because the goal is not simply to find the RFP faster. The goal is to know the requirement may be coming before it becomes an RFP. So here's the takeaway. Do not treat pre-RFP activity like optional reading.
It is capture. Make your business findable. Monitor forecasts and early notices. Respond when the government asks for market information. Use evidence instead of broad claims. Show capability, capacity, past performance, pricing reality, and credible teaming. Because if the government is trying to determine whether a healthy small business market exists, make sure your company is part of the answer. If you want help strengthening your federal visibility or want to see how FedBiz 365 can help you identify opportunities earlier, call FedBiz Access at 844-628-8914 for a complimentary demonstration. Thanks for listening to FedBiz 5, and until next time, get there early, make your case, and keep winning in government contracting.